Alright, y'all, I'm coming at you with another astrology video today. Today, it is Mars in the 6th house. Mars is how you follow your gut instinct, how you take action in life, how aggressive you are, how assertive you are in situations. It's not, about talking, it's about following your gut instincts. Do you question that more? Do you follow that? Take initiative? Do you do things with a passion, with great energy? Do you not do things with a great energy but still get shit done? Do you like to cooperate with others and have a plan about doing things? Do you like to be driven by your past? The bad things that happened in your past drive you forward. Caring deeply for others moves you. Mars has to do with that energy, right? The planet of action, right? And then we're talking about that being in the 6th house. So the house of service to yourself and others, your health, mental and physical, your daily routine, whatever that will look like. For this person, it'll be a very active routine. You'll always be doing something. Your days are full of all kinds of stuff, work, family, everything. But you are, very involved in your life, with other people's lives. And people know about what you do for day to day. They might not know all the details, but they know you're doing something. You're a busy fucking person with this placement. And like I said, you also, leave legacy too. That's some shit they'll remember you for, being a person that is productive, right? Somebody who is, puts energy and time into thinking about, or not thinking about, it ain't thinking about accomplishing their goals mostly. Damn near, just that, right? Just accomplishing their goals, getting things done, starting things when other people don't want to, that kind of thing. So let's get into the first Mars sign, right? We're going to go through the 12 zodiac signs, right? So we have Aries, Mars in the 6th house. So Aries, Mars is the aggressive, assertive, passionate type of person, right? You could be any, buddy with this placement, right? You have it in the 6th house. You like to go to the gym a lot, probably. You probably like to do a lot of physical activities. You like to probably, you probably fight people too. Because like you like to let them know, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. And you don't like just, talk about it. You then do, and they know what you're doing, right? You might get into fights. People might, get you, riled up. You're easily irritated by people, but you also like to not be stagnant at all. Thinking is not one of your things. You do this. You think, but you think with your gut. So you definitely take decisive action. You do not wait for anything. If nobody wants to do it, then you're gonna do it. You have that courage to like stand up and put yourself through it. Nobody else wants to do this. Fine, you're cowards, and I'll do it. And you'll have no problem doing that shit, right? And that's how you people are and you take action in your life. You're definitely a definition of a go-getter. You like to bring that to the workplace. You like to bring that to your gym life and anything outside of gym. You like to challenge your, people you're in a relationship with, family members, do more. There's always something you can do. So do it. I don't got to do it for you. I'm already doing all kinds of shit. And that's you. Trying to like make sure your health's right. You take care of yourself physically for sure. And you always challenge people to like, push yourself and them to do better. When you go, that's probably something that they'll remember you for. They'll be like, I loved him or her. They always, call me out for shit and other things. And sometimes I didn't like it, but guess what? That needed to be said at that time. And I really needed that, and always challenging you on things. These people do shit like that, right? So the next sign is Taurus, Mars in the 6th house. So Taurus, Mars in the 6th house, you like to get shit done, but you do like to eliminate risk a little bit. So if you're set on something, you ain't gonna move either, right? From that position. You want to have this kind of job, you want to work with these kind of people. That is what you stick to. And you don't give a fuck what other people think or whatever, because that's what you want. Now, you don't care either about what other people think either. You're gonna do that because that's what you set out to do. You like to make sure your money's right. So anything about making sure you're secure, right? You're comfortable in your living space. You always make sure you have enough money if you want to get something, right? To make yourself feel good, to make yourself, it's basically showing yourself love and, caring for yourself. You don't care about what other people think, and it ain't about showing off for other people. See, an Aries might show off for other people sometimes, but you won't. You do it in silence and you build in silence. So over time, it's like, you'll just always be there. You'll be that person who's like, in the background, kind of not appreciated, but you don't care because you have what you already need. You have that security. Your money's right, your food's right, all that's good, right? And yeah, you like to eat food too. That drives you. Food drives you, and any kind of like anything that appeals to your senses drives you forward, right? And once you're set on something you like in those kind of ways, nobody's fucking moving you, man. They ain't. And keep doing that. Cause like you could be any sign with this placement. That's how you like move around. That's how you get shit done. You'll find the right job and everything. And you'll be somebody who is like loyal too. So like if you find the right job and you feel like you can do that for a long time, you're actually somebody who can stay for a long time in a certain career, or you're gonna build your own business and have that shit on the side or whatever. Again, you're driven by money as well, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people like to downplay shit like that. It ain't nothing wrong with that, and then people won't hate you for it. I won't. But I'm somebody who's also kind of not like you, but similar because I'm a Taurus sun, right? So I have that stubborn edge too. Now the next sign is Gemini Mars in the 6th house. So Gemini Mars will like to think up a very methodical plan, but do it with other people. See, they don't want to just go off of what they know. They want to learn from other people too, and they do. They've done they do research and shit, right? Some people like to some of these Mars Geminis like to be the one to be like my plan is more foolproof than yours because I did do the due diligence and I did study what we were supposed to study to get into this career, and then have this, buy this, or do whatever what we're trying to get done, right, as a group. And these people like to plan things out ahead of time. They like to eliminate risk as well. They'll do their research with the books, looking shit up online, talking to other people who actually do whatever they do. So like if they're trying to, like let's say this person's trying to become a doctor, right? Like medical doctor, they're gonna like go to these people who are medical doctors and like read their papers, actually confront them, maybe do video talks. you know older wind signs would probably do a face-to-face. Younger ones, like with the Mars placement even, they will probably do the whole, online thing. And they're good at that shit. People who have wind placements are, good at, using technology to get a message out or anything like that. And Gemini is also one of those sides. Um, and they typically know what they're talking about when they're, trying to do something. Because this is Mars, right? So they have intentions. They intend to get something done. They intend to get something out of conversation. It's not just for the sake of talking. It's for the sake of moving some things along to get something done. But then with them, it's like this is where they could go wrong. They could over-explain, and then it becomes one of those things where this or that, and then it's like they're not decisive, necessarily. But this is the thing, they don't always stay interested in the same thing. So it's also a positive too. They're a bit flexible in how they move. And that's like with relationships too. Um, they might question their decisions. Like I said, they like to eliminate risk too. Gemini, Mars like to do shit like that. The next sign is, and they'll, like I said, they'll read books for their mental health, and they'll like look things up a lot. Always trying to be ahead of people as far as having information and then to disseminate it, but not just for the sake of talking, for the sake of making things happen. They actually legitimately want to like get some things off the ground, improve their lives, gain more shit, and they do. That's why they're taking the information in to get things started, get things moving, better job, better money, all kinds of shit. They really think that shit through. Now the next sign is Cancer Mars in the sixth house. Now Cancer Mars is not a detriment, it's the fall of Mars. But, those people really care about their families. Or if they don't have families for unfortunate reasons, they have their people that they like, their friend group that they really like, right? And they call them their family. Now, see, they like to be of use to these people. And they do. These people like to be, like, support them. I'll do whatever I can to make sure these people are right. I'll do the best. I'll do my best so they know that I can hold my own weight. That kind of thing. And whatever it is, work. Maybe they're on a sports team and they do sports. I'm going to do this so they know that I'm doing this, and I'm a part of that, and they like me for this. Um, and I really care about the people in my life. I'll even do shit for them. They're very supportive to others, right? They get emotional, right? So these are people driven by their emotions. They do follow their gut instinct, but see, they're not like the Scorpio. They can let shit really get them down. So let's say they planned on doing something with their family or somebody they really cared about, and it falls through. They start to think about themselves, like, what did I do wrong, and this and that, and this and that. Certain ones may even try to make the situation worse by telling them why they didn't do something right in the past, because Cancer is a sign that's ruled by the past. Your actions back then led me to be like this now, so why are you doing this kind of thing? And then it just causes some problems in their life, instead of being wise about it and being like, okay, maybe they just don't want to do it today. And we usually do things like this today. We go on a date, or I go to work at this time, and um, after work I go with them to do this or that, right? Friends or whatever, and they don't do it. The person who uses this placement like healthy, in a healthy way, will be like, okay, well, that's fine as long as we do come back together, because you care about that connection, you care about doing that shit with people. you know you need to give people space, because sometimes you might be in a negative mood, or you just, what you do, it might be too clingy and shit, and you want, people want to be away from you. You gotta give people fucking space if you have this placement. You love them, you care about them, and you do, but you gotta let them, do them. And they probably do appreciate you somewhat, or do appreciate you. You gotta give them some space to like breathe and shit for themselves. They'll know when to come back. Trust me, they'll know. It ain't a lack of anything, because like you like to think about the past a lot, and that could like really fucking wash you guys down. You'll get pulled under, as they say, right? And you don't want to get pulled under. You want to go with the flow, and you have the ability to do that. The next sign is Leo, Mars in the sixth house. So Leo, Mars in the sixth house, you are a go-getter too. You have certain things that you like to get done in a certain way. You like to be seen. You like to be seen in a like a person that's on their shit. You don't like people giving you a bad reputation. And for the most part, you're not even like one of those types of Leo Mars that likes to fuck around. You don't. You like to, like I said, get shit done. If you have work to do, you have work to do. And you're on that shit. They know you're on that. They know you're about your work life. They know you're about, you know, balancing your schedule and shit. Doing everything with, a loud roar, if you know what I mean. You like to bring people together too. You like to make sure everything is in accordance with what it's supposed to be. So your job is this. So you're gonna do this. Nobody's doing somebody else's job, and you also have the ability to know. Also, okay, since you're lacking in this department, we're gonna switch you over here because I believe you work better over here. Because you actually take note of these things too. It ain't just you're on your shit and you do like to outshine people and you like that recognition and everything from everybody else, but it's also when you're actually healthy about it and you want to bring everybody else in the group or your workspace. You like to take charge in that manner and be like, yeah, this guy don't need to work here, he needs to be over here. That's where he shines, or that's where she shines. She can't be working in this spot. And you might have classes with people who are above you. But then if you have your own shit in your own kingdom, that might be your family in your house. You let people know what they can and can't do, and you like to rule shit. Really have command over things in your life. Friend groups. You like to be the center of attention. You like to do things in a loud way. Always showing up though. Always showing up. People might even be jealous of you on the side, but you're always showing up, always there, always doing your best. And you're like the beacon, the light of that. Other people might not get recognition, so they get jealous of you. But you're that person who does shit like that. And you do. You make sure you're on your P's and Q's, dotting your I's, crossing your T's in anything you do, sports, any kind of physical activity, any kind of, job, any kind of time with the family and shit. You like to, bring their spirits up, friends too. You really like that. People would, really, say good things about you. And even people who hate you, like I said, they're jealous. But even they would have to be like, damn, this guy or this person is just they're always fucking there and they're always being seen. And they're always, getting that glaze from everybody. Next person is Virgo, Mars in the sixth house. Now you are a person who thinks things through before taking action. You like to have a well thought out plan, and then you execute that plan right after. Soon thereafter, or let's say you like to plan days out ahead of time. That's when shit falls apart for you though. That, or you, for somehow you forget about, people in your planning. You gotta account for idiocy, right? You're a person who likes to really think things through. Unpredictable things, they come. And you like to adapt. You like to adapt. But you shouldn't overthink things all the time. And that's why you come into, conflict with people. Because you like to take a well thought out plan. So you eliminate risk. But then there's people who are actually about Mars energy. They have home placements and exaltation points. These people don't like that. They need action. They need something to happen now. They don't need shit to happen later, right? So then you get upset because you might know what they're talking about, and you may even, need to consider them in your plan. They can do something get the ball rolling on something, and then you can, then come in later and do something else. Whatever, propose that plan when, shit's, done, handled, or it ain't handled because, somebody wasn't accounting for things that you're accounting for. But you don't just run up on people and try to, impose that shit on them. You can do that shit for yourself all day, and you can, and it ain't like you won't get anywhere, because you will. You like to do that for yourself. The only thing with this place, and like I said, you might want to not do that shit and like just come up in somebody's face and be like, don't do this. These are the this and that and this. Sometimes in life, it's you gotta take risks. And they'll tell you that shit too. They'll say some shit like that. You will eliminate the risk and still get results, and you will, but you might not get recognition. It ain't because you're cowardice or anything like that. You also focus on money. That's what drives you to money. I don't like, because like you don't want to fuck your body up, because you also know what you're physically capable of, as this is an earth placement. You understand what you're physically capable of, and if at the present you can't do something like that, or you didn't have those plans in mind, right away you're like, I don't think so. I'll have to think about it. Not even like you're not going to try something new, but you still, need to think about it. But once you've thought everything through, you execute your plans and you execute them flawlessly. And not everybody will recognize it, but the people who do will be like, damn, you know, you're really dotting your I's and crossing your T's. You got your money right, you got your, workout plan, perfectly. Nobody has to really hold your hand, over there. That kind of shit, right? And you may like nitpick situations, and then like also not just nitpick them, but you'll clean situations up. Let's say somebody overlooked something at work. You're the person that goes in there and cleans it up and fixes it. Before anybody else sees or whatever. And it's ingrained in you to be like that, because it pisses you off too. The fact that people don't he calls to the finer details, the small details. All that shit matters, and it builds up. And you like to eliminate those errors. Yeah. And you should do that, because that's your natural instincts. Your internal instincts tell you that. But maybe not be so forceful with other people who, like to move faster and shit. And maybe even consider, when you're planning something out with them, maybe you have to like have a plan where you just don't eliminate the risk, or just don't fuck with those people at all. Have fun with them when you need to, but don't make plans with them then. Find people who like to make plans and then plan accordingly with them. Now, the next sign is Libra Mars in the 6th house. I'm a Libra Mars, but mine's is not in the 6th house. You people like to weigh pros and cons out. Do I feel like doing this? And also, is this logical? Would I, be seen in a negative way for doing this? Not just that, all kind of things. Will I not be seen as, negative enough? Will I, do this, do that? You like to plan things out with other people sometimes too. You like to talk things over with yourself or other people and make a decision, and it is based on your feelings too, as Libra is ruled by Venus. But this is, Mars, right? So you might be seen as passive aggressive, but the way you get shit done, you ain't overthinking though either. See, it's not overthinking. It's you knowing your options, knowing everything that's available for you to do in a said moment, and then like looking at each one, not too much, but enough. Okay, if I do this, then this might happen. Okay, that might not be that might be more risky. Okay, if I do this is safe, but I don't want to do this, right? I don't want to do that safe shit. We already know what's gonna happen from that. You know, every given moment has their, actions that you need to take. You know, you might second guess yourself on something risky, but some days you want to just do that. And I know because I'm somebody who's like that, who has a Libra in Mars, right? But you do think about that. Do I feel in this moment right now that that's the right thing for me to do? You know, will my actions impact me in the long run? Will people, you know, be upset by these actions? Basically, you like to take a peaceful approach to shit too. But you also like to bring balance to yourself with this placement. It ain't like you're just a people pleaser, like people think. That's not what it is. With this Mars placement, you like to like I said, sometimes you'll take that risk and then it throws some people off. But for you, it's like, well, I want to know what I'm capable of, and I want to take that risk. And when you actually trust yourself and things, you're like, I'm smart enough. I'll figure something out. And there's always, people. I can, talk to somebody if I need be. You know, you don't like to, be the loudest in the room, but you like to have an impact still. You may even, some of, you more gutsy Libra Mars, right, will bring conflict to an end and like actually bring impact on shit, like, dissolve issues before they arise. You like to do shit like that. And every person who has this kind of placement has their own sense of justice. Everybody's different. I understand mine's. But, you know, you do like weigh your options before making a decision. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm somebody who has that placement, continue as you do, you know. And then like that's the thing. Once you make a decision, you're taking action. Like the wind is, it's calm wind with Libra, but then once it moves, it moves towards what it needs. You know. Now, the next placement is Scorpio, Mars in the sixth house. Scorpio, Mars, your person who is definitely a driven person, definitely a person who goes after what they desire, no matter what anybody else thinks or whatever. Now you are driven by your past as well. You might have come from conflict or other things. Probably not with this placement. You might have some kind of problems though from your past, and you probably do, but you don't use it in a negative way per se. It always basically, no matter what, you're gonna make it happen. If you have to be the bad guy, you have to be the bad guy. If you have to be the good guy, you can be the good guy. You don't give a fuck. You're gonna make it happen. That's it. The result matters. If you have to change and become something new to make something happen for your goals, then that's what you have to do. If you have to, leave somebody, that's the shit that, kind of hurts though. Hurts somebody like you. Now you hide it from other people and shit, but when you have to leave somebody you had a deep connection with, that kind of thing, or somebody, did you wrong in that kind of way. But you guys are actually good at still converting that energy into moving forward. See, I like to say that you're a secret fire sign, a little bit. You have that, like, gasoline in your guts, so you're really fueled to do shit. You can't be, stagnant, but you basically, this is like the fixed energy of Scorpio. You're emotionally driven by something, a strong emotion, something you feel, anger, lust, something, and other people may or may not know about it, but everything is for that, and you just, you make it happen. But you're also somebody who likes to fight and shit, and, that causes conflict, but you like that too. You like to, cause conflict a little bit to see what you're, capable of. You like to seek those thrills, right? Really gutsy about shit. If it's like slightly, you might die from doing something, you're the type of person who likes to, try that shit and really put your life live life on the edge in that manner. You don't always do shit like that with everybody else because you understand everybody else. It's not like that. They don't have guts like that. And like keep shit to yourself. People will know or they won't, but they probably will once you start doing shit. See, you care about your money too. This Scorpio placement, Mars, Scorpio in the sixth house. You care about your money and where it goes and all of that. You're on top of your fucking business, whatever your business is. People, money, all of that shit. You're on top of that, and you're driven by it, right? You're driven to. You don't want to, fight people, but you will if you have to. You try to eliminate toxicity with this placement, actually. If you're somebody who has Mars and Scorpio in this placement, you try to use negativity in a positive way. And you actually have the ability to do that, to get results for yourself, that kind of thing. So keep doing that. That's what you do naturally. People don't got guts like you. The next sign is Sagittarius, Mars in the sixth house. So Sagittarius, Mars in the sixth house. You, with Sagittarius, Mars, you like to move. And you like to move fast because it's fire. You like to light the way, It's funner over here, let's do this, Let me do this because, you're lame and you want to do something else, fine. But I'm doing this. I'm set on, doing whatever it might be, doing a new sport, getting into new activity, anything. But you ain't gonna be patient about it. You're gonna do it when you want to. You're gonna have the confidence too in yourself. Why? Because you've done it like many of times. You just do things without thinking. You might not have came out without any scratches or, but you learned something from it. And then you have that confidence to like do something again and like keep trying. Like you have a positive outlook on like that kind of thing, right? Whereas other people try to drag you down and you don't like that kind of energy. You try to move away from that energy. And even sometimes you challenge it too sometimes. And you're like, why do you think in that manner? And why can't you, see the, positives of this? But you ain't, necessarily, um, what's the word? You're pissed off about that. Let's not like, cap. You're pissed off that other people won't see the positives in their life or, attack things. Maybe you even understand maybe that they're not like you, but like, don't drag yourself down. Don't, belittle yourself like that. Try to see the positives, and if they can't, then you get into conflict with these people, because then they, try to drain you or, make you, put you down, knock you down a peg or whatever, and you're ready for that if you need to, right? But you like to be positive about things. You like to see the positive in situations. Even if you lose, you have something to be learned there, that kind of thing. And at least you had the courage to fucking do it and try something new. And then, like, not just, dwell in that. You don't do shit like that. You move on. Like, you know how to move on and shit. You know how to just, like, get to the next thing. Okay, that happened. And then other people, and that's another thing that might piss you off. People who stay stuck in the past and shit. And you don't like that. You like newness. You like people who, keep your vibes up. But you're also that person who does that shit for everybody else because you're a person that has tried all kind of things. You don't let people try to box you in that kind of way. No, you can't do that. And like you're that rebellious kid in some ways, more free spirited, and you're like, no, and you let them know, why you want to do it or whatever. Sometimes you didn't, and you just got in conflict with your parents too. But you learn from your mistakes, and from those mistakes, you try to, help others too. You wouldn't try to stop somebody else though, necessarily. Unless you knew something was like really fucked up, you shouldn't do that because, something really bad happened and you almost, didn't bounce back from it. Then you would definitely, try to stop somebody from doing some shit. If it ain't that, then you probably wouldn't. And even then, you probably still wouldn't. You probably just give a warning, and that's it. And people like you, like I said, because you're somebody who does that, and you believe in people going after what they want. You know, not sitting there crying about it, not trying to drag everybody else's mood down, just making it happen. Now, the next sign is Capricorn. Capricorn, Mars in the sixth house. Now, you are about your business for real. Taking the career shit to the extreme almost. But you like to have things, and you like to have status, and you like to have, the respect as well from people. You know, and you just like to be a person that's like well off, and also a person. It ain't for the glaze with you. It's just ingrained in you to like I have the ability to do this. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna execute. I don't like to be slow about shit, so I'm gonna do it. There's always something for me to do to climb the career ladder, to grow my money, to you know beat somebody in something physical, to anything, right? You like to make sure your physical activity is taken care of. You're reading books. You're you know but specifically about business and making money, and that's you having that in the sixth house, right? You like to like even like let your people know you mean business. Your younger family members, sons or daughters, if you have them, you put restrictions on them so they don't fall into pit holes. And like and you like it ain't like you're telling them to not do something, right? You change their trajectory. You get them on the right path, and then you're like do this instead. you know it's not like, oh, don't do that, and then they're just sitting there wondering what to do. You then have the moves that they need to make to do something like make money in the future, and not be out of it, right? And let's say you were a person who's a Capricorn Mars and you are actually broke. You have still the ability to know what actions you need to take to make that money. And you do, because you have it instinctually inside yourself. You're like, I'm irritated, but you're irritated because you know that you have the ability to do something. Talk to somebody, and you probably don't like talking too much to people, but I can do something for somebody and make that money. And then, stack up, make that money, you know, and stay disciplined. You have that ability too, you know, and you don't like to be that person, right? That ain't on their shit, or doesn't have it together and give advice to people. You like to be that person once you have your money and your place and everything's, stable. That's when you start like digging in people's asses and shit. You don't really like to do that shit when you're down, but sometimes you do. And then you could get into fights with people. But what you're saying actually ain't wrong, actually, because you see things in a real manner. See, earth signs see what's actually there, the things that are actually there. Now, you're not concerned about the emotions or anything about that. If a table is black, a table is black. If it has four legs, it has four legs. That kind of thing. And you can see that, and you're like saying, hey, that's what it is. It's not a fucking whatever the fuck you think it is, right? And you like to like give people reality checks, no matter where you are in life, and that's the truth. you know um but yeah, you're also aggressive too, but you're aggressive in a healthy way. You don't like to lose money, so you'll be upset if you lose money. You care about respect, so when people disrespect you, you're gonna say something about it and then do something about it if you have to. And you like to nip shit in the bud, execute right away, and then before you know it, shit is there. Everything's the way you want it to be. And again, you don't care about what other people think. The actions speak for themselves because you have so much shit after a while. With your career, with your money that you like, you find the things you like. You have a lot of that shit because you're materialistic. Now, not as much as tourists, but you still are. So you're like, I all this. I don't even give a fuck about you like that. Now the next sign is Aquarius Mars in the sixth house. So Aquarius Mars in the sixth house, you like to talk to people and get ahead that way. Pose your ideas to people, make it sound interesting, or it is interesting, and then people want to talk to you more and be like, hey, that sounds interesting. How are we going to do this? You might like to start a podcast, or you might want to get something off the ground, but you're gonna have to talk to these people. You like to talk to people who also have interesting ideas. You don't like to hear the same shit all the time, so you like to talk to people, and you find people, and you do like to find people. You, with this placement, you don't like to not find people. You like to influence people with your words and get them to move in ways that you might have already knew they would move. And other things, you like to plan things out too. You like to do experiments with people sometimes. And that's what I like to say about you. You like to sit there and I expected them to do this, but maybe this will happen with this individual. You like to get other people riled up. You like to try to understand why other people do what they do. And then when you learn that, you may even try to be like that yourself. But for you, you don't like just being stagnant. You like to try new things, right? You need like to not limit yourself. So you'll read books a lot too, and do your research. You know, you like people who are a little bit, and you go after things that are a little bit, outside the norm, but not always in crazy ways. Sometimes you're trying to revolutionize something. I'm saying that kind of way, not what other people might think. Like actually, trying to improve society and that kind of thing, and you think in those terms. And like before you make moves, because like you move to try to make impact and inspire others, you know, with your actions. Now you may or may not know that you won't be seen for this, but as long as that impact's there, and some people acknowledge it through word, that's all you need. That's all you need. And you do like to plan things out ahead of time, and you do like to coordinate with other people and network and make money that way, and make friends that way, meaningful connections, not just the ones that are, not always there. The ones that are always there, you can call upon them and they can call upon you, and you always have that, communication, there, that you're always doing shit with people, a friend group, you know, contacts that, get you right with your money, all that. You make sure all that's taken care of in your life. Now, last but not least, it's Pisces Mars in the sixth house. So Pisces Mars, you're driven by your emotions as well. You like to think outside the box, but be creative. So you're not thinking so much in a dry manner, or a very even logical manner, but you like to bring your imagination to life, and you actually do that. But not in the ways that other people think. You just bring that feeling to life, and then you like to sometimes escape reality, and it works for you though. See, because you attract people who want to help you and other things. They don't want to see you down, crying, or downtrodden, because they understand that you are a person who moves to also help people out. You care about helping you out for the sake of your own self, right? I help you out, you help me. I scratch my back, you scratch mine. But you always know how to like place yourself in those situations. You know how to talk nice to people. You know how to get what you want out of people, get people moving for you, that kind of deal, right? You like to kind of have control. More Scorpio, but you do too. But that's only in those situations where, you have those true deep emotional connections. With anybody else, you'll be like, okay, that's fine. You like to experience different things in this life, good, bad, you don't care. You like to experience all of that life has to offer. And you like to do that for yourself more so than others, and people are involved with that. You understand that your actions um, will also make other people feel some type of way emotionally or whatever. And honestly, you don't give a fuck at times if it makes them feel, negative, and you don't because you've had to experience that experience, whatever it is, a new job, something, dangerous, something, you were thinking about, because you're a creative person, right? You might be into the arts and shit. You might want to, quit your job and do shit like that. That turned people sideways for a little bit, but then you started, making income from it because you're somebody who needs to move like that. You're a person who likes to, oh shit, you're a person who likes to, be very creative and touchy feeling with the opposite sex, multiple partners and other shit. But that's just how you move. You need that emotional connection. You need that emotional companion all the time sometimes. And then when it's not there, it's like you're not, um, god damn, you're just not that person because you ain't hearing it from somebody else. And that's not fulfilling you. But then there's those of you who don't need that, and you're already, attracting other people and getting attention and, in a creative way. You like to be fun too, you people. You know, not less romantic in your, you know, with your, partners and shit like that either. That's why you get emotional when you do get, cut off, and you might, get toxic for a while. But then you have to go through that season of being alone and getting back, right? And then you, come back to it and you're like, we're all connected and we all go through this kind of shit. So, if I see somebody down on their luck or whatever, I'm going to be there for them because you believe in, interacting with other people, and there's importance in that. And you may or may not be friends with this person, but you might take that step to, at least get them on the right path because you feel them and you don't want them to, and there's something for you to, gain from it too. That could be money or, just the feeling of, I helped another human being out, and I know whatever the fuck anybody else is saying about me, that ain't it, because I know what I did for this person, that actually changed them for, the better. Now, that is Mars in the sixth house for all the signs, all of the Mars signs. I'll be back next week with Jupiter in the sixth house. Be cool, corn on the corner. I have the natal readings. For people who want them, $350. That's your Western astrology, Chinese, Vedic, numerology reading, all of that. $350. My email, and I'll get it to you. But be cool, corn on the corner. And this was another astrology video by me.